welcome to the chair and vice chair meeting. I think this is now the third one we've done, and quarterly could be corrected, so do correct me in chat if there has been more. Bit of housekeeping. We're recording, so please do bear that in mind. And also, if there's any questions on there that you wouldn't like to be published, please make sure you note the provide notice to the team afterwards, just so we can make sure that's not included in the video edit. Please use the chat. This is a good chance to kind of communicate with your fellow volunteers and other chairs and community leaders. Just during the presentations, if you could just keep your webcams and mics off, that would just help us with just the streams. And a reminder, we'll have Q&A during the session. Feel free to kind of Q&A, put your questions down as you think of them, and I'll do a bit of facilitation and just pick up the questions when we have that time break to put questions to our speakers. And then finally, the question we always get, are we sharing? The answer is yes, we'll be sharing the video and slides afterwards. Just a reminder, we're all BCS members here. We've all signed a code of conduct. So just a reminder just to be kind of courteous and just be aware of professional behaviours. I'm sure I don't need to tell people that, but just to make sure that everybody feels comfortable asking questions and that everybody feels comfortable in the session. Just a quick run through the agenda, as we are short of time. So we're going to start off with a little bit of a focus on inclusion consultation and outcomes, and they'll be presented to you by Holly Porter, Managing Director of BCS Institute. They'll then be followed up by an update on the Community Support Committee roadmap. There's been quite a lot of work there, and Jack's going to talk you through that and some of the key milestones. And at that point, we're going to break for some Q&A. We've allocated about probably about half hour to that first section. And then we've got a guest with us joining today, so we're really thankful that Beth Clark's joined us from the SIGIST specialist group. And Beth's going to be sharing a little bit of the tactics that she and her group use in making the most of social media, some really good insight templates that they've made available too. So thank you for that, Beth. And then lastly, it's been a while, but we're starting now to look at the member group rules. And so Chris is going to be talking through a little bit around the approach, and Safpal's joined us as a CSE committee member for our events and conferences to help us, and volunteer development to help us with a workshop, giving you an opportunity to kind of kick the tires on the approach that we're taking and any additional ideas you have for that review. So that's enough from me at this point. I'll be joining you back in during a Q&A, and I'm going to pass over to Holly.
Okay, really good to see so many people on the call, and you'll all be aware that we have done some work over the past few months to understand more about inclusion in the member groups community. So this all started in about January time. So it seems quite a while that it's taken to update you, but we've been through quite a few steps. So what I'm going to talk about today is on the back of the inclusion consultation, what we found, a bit of background to why we did it in the first place as a reminder, and also some of the way that we're going to be taking action going forward, and then lots of opportunity to ask questions as well. So if I just start with a bit of a word about BCS and EDI, it's I think it's fair to say that there's a lot of really good practice and also a really strong public narrative that BCS has. There's lots of examples from within our community as well that we can be really proud of. We've seen different groups forming across the community over the past few years, neurodiversity being a great example. We've got Pride Group as well, Embrace in terms of ethnic diversity. So lots of activity that's volunteer led over the past few years. We're also regularly hosting events, an example being Women Pivoting to Digital Careers that was hosted by BCS Women, and we supported that. Was at the end of April. And BCS as a sort of corporate and policy entity also does a lot of work. We do an annual diversity and inclusion report to make sure that we're highlighting and spotlighting different aspects of inclusion, and really sort of sharing our insights with the broader profession. We work in partnership, so we've got a partnership with Coding Black Females, and we did a report and a survey, and all of this puts us in the public eye and makes us a leading voice within the profession, and that's very much something that we want to continue. At the moment, we're very busy with the new government trying to influence around policy. So we've got a manifesto that many of you may have seen. So Rashik has recently posted after the King's speech, and there are 3 areas of our manifesto that we're highlighting. The first one being around anyone with a significant role in information technology should prove their accountability by being professionally registered, including leaders who are working on sort of critical national infrastructure. So becoming chartered is the recommendation there, which you'd expect from a professional body. The second one is all around education, and in terms of every child and adult deserves access to a world-class computing education and digital literacy education. And the final one is around closing the gender gap and broader inclusion. So closing the gender gap in information technology can solve many of its issues around trust, bias and safety. So we're citing aspects of the report that we did. Over 500,000 women are missing from the profession. Also, thousands of people aged 50 and over and people with disabilities are underrepresented in the digital sector. So you can see that inclusion is a really big focal point across the BCS member groups community, but also corporately from our narrative perspective. It hasn't always gone smoothly for us. We had a challenging incident just before, I think before Christmas last year. So this was a bit of a wake-up call where we attracted some online criticism, sort of quite public criticism from a high-profile figure around the publication of one of our member group events. We publish lots of information about our events all the time. This particular one, we'd ended up with an all-male panel, and one of the Labour parliamentary candidates, Samantha Niblett, highlighted this. She's known to us. We work closely with her on the policy front. She's now the MP for South Derbyshire. And she championed women in digital for Labour. And so you can see what she said. We love working with you, but this lets you down. An IT leaders panel with all men, no doubt great experience, but how are we going to inspire the next generation if we haven't got women's voices as part of the mix? So fair criticism. We reacted immediately. We cancelled the event, and we posted a response. And we also felt we needed to take action and take a look to make sure such a thing didn't happen again. So the community board held an emergency meeting, and we agreed a position around no all-male panel programs or panels, and as a measure. But we also accepted that we needed to do more to understand inclusion more broadly across the community. So that's the genesis of the research that we're going to be sharing the insights on. So the position that we took was all around positive action around gender diversity. We accept this is not the only area of inclusion that we need to be championing, but certainly in terms of this event and the response, the positive action was deemed to be the best route forward. And actually, we've had this in place, and it's been that John and the team have been sort of monitoring this. We've had a couple of other instances that we've caught, but largely our member groups are sort of planning their events well in advance, and don't find it too much of a challenge to adhere to the guidelines. So the inclusion consultation was commissioned through Community Board. So myself and John led this. We engaged an external consultant who knew BCS quite well. Was also a chartered engineer by background, had worked with another professional body and had volunteered extensively for one of the engineering institutions. So we felt that was a really good fit. And what we did was to work with Anne-Marie Tuck to create a model that would enable the member groups community, the volunteer, the committees and the broader volunteers to share insights, but to do this in a way that was anonymous and to do this in a safe space. So John and the team and myself, none of us were in the focus groups, and the survey was anonymous as well, but it sought to understand some of the barriers that we may be experiencing and the lived experiences out in the member groups community. So this went out in a few waves in sort of January and February, and then we got 113 survey responses out of 700 volunteers, and we also held some focus groups, some discussion groups, which we felt was important, so that we could kind of delve a bit deeper into the feelings and the lived experiences and some of those barriers. There was a demographic survey done in parallel, and the demographics weren't attributed to individuals. It was just enabled us to get a broader kind of snapshot of the community and the respondents. So there's a big weighty report, as you'd expect, containing the consultation findings. It's my job tonight to try and summarise this briefly into the headlines, and also to share the recommendations on what we're going to be doing next, most importantly. So I think it was quite interesting to see that the inclusion measures that we've taken so far, you know, had a mixed response, you know, and it drew out other things. So I think the main point was around inclusion officers and the role of inclusion officers. We have 51 inclusion officers currently out of the member groups community. And while this is positive in many ways, it also raises questions about how the inclusion officers can be better supported centrally, and also better connected, and a feeling really that sometimes it's actually quite a burden, and it almost delegates the responsibility to inclusion to that one individual, rather than being a broader responsibility of the whole group to ensure that you know, they're creating a safe and inclusive space and inclusive programmes. And actually this is the first time we'd had such strong feedback on that. And also the measures that we taken had been seen as positive, but there was also some negativity, so we needed to understand that a bit more. And so the focus groups were a great source of that. But another thing that we probably won't be too surprised to hear is that, you know, people didn't feel that we're representative of the broader profession in terms of diversity, certainly in committee membership. And I think overall the profession has a massive challenge. Gender diversity is 20%, hasn't really moved in many years, and you know, I think this is crucial to the success of the overall profession, something that we should all be taking really seriously. So you know, this feedback was really valuable. I think in terms of the policy that was put in place around the positive action for no male or male panels, and include and ensuring we had a gender balance, there were a couple of issues highlighted with that policy as well, in terms of, you know, a discomfort in inviting people in case there was an impression that they would be invited in as a token or not on merit. That didn't feel very comfortable for some people. But probably the most shocking statistic that we got was the one in red around the experiences around discrimination or harassment. You know, we all volunteer and we all get involved because we want to welcome everybody, want to create a safe space, but there are instances where this absolutely has not happened and we've fallen short. And so we need to address this. This isn't about trying to root out what's happened in the past. It's about trying to understand a bit more what's happened, and understanding whether people feel able to speak out. So there are also instances around BCS employees as well. So this is, you know, also not comfortable for any of us to read. But the good thing was that we did have a sense that volunteers are likely to speak out about inequality, exclusion, harassment, and all of the and micro behaviours. When people are in the moment, I think that there's a key challenge around, well, if you're going to speak out, what do you then do with that information? And that's another piece of feedback that we got through the survey in terms of the channels needing to be a bit clearer. But I'll come to that in a second. So those are the sort of key findings. The recommendations being the important bit, because this has informed the action plan that we're putting in place now. Big piece around clear and consistent communication that's necessary. And I think, you know, we want to first highlight how important it is that people feel comfortable to volunteer, and how we appreciate all of the fantastic work that's going on, and in creating an inclusive community for BCS, and that lots of progress has been made. Yeah, I think it would be really easy to disenfranchise some people through this sort of messaging, so we need to do this carefully. So the communications, the first part of that is this evening to you as chairs, and then I know that we're planning this session in September where we'll have a wider session to share this further with the volunteer community. The support is key in terms of making sure that people have got resources and a point person to contact, and so this is something that has been recommended that we're also considering. And also setting some goals. You know, we really want to be seen as an organisation that is working to best practice. We've got that opportunity. We want to be influential, so we need to set some goals and some targets. We need to do that carefully and in the right way, just to make sure that we can measure the progress that we're making. And also making inclusion a fundamental part of the BCS brand. I think that's important because it's not, I wouldn't want anybody to get the impression that this is around the member groups community only. Absolutely is not. We've got work to do internally as an organisation. We've got work to sort of join up and understand the voices from other parts of the community. We've got the community at schools, community within education and public benefit. And we've also got some advice that we've had some recommendations from council. So all of this needs to form part of a broader programme for BCS. So we've got 37 action points to act on, and we've distilled those into a plan. So if I just go on to the headlines of the plan, I'm not going to go through detailed milestones, but there are 4 parts of this. There's firstly around structure. What structure have we got in place around inclusion? And the great news is that Community Board signed off an inclusion executive just last week. So we're going to be setting up an inclusion executive within Community Board as a reporting committee, so that we can draw in all that best practice and we have an oversight body for our plan. And also we need to think about staff ownership and that channel of communication. Communications piece, really important that I've mentioned, but also picking up on that feedback from the role of inclusion officers, and also really kind of driving home that zero tolerance message for harassment, which is vitally important that we set that stall out at the outset. We had some good practice at the beginning of the meeting where we talked about the code of conduct. I think we've got opportunities to strengthen, you know, that upfront messaging through zero tolerance for harassment and things like that. So we need to think about how best to get that policy across. I know we're going to be talking about member group rules, so there's an opportunity here, and also thinking about what we're going to report on and how the inclusion sort of functions within the broader committee structure. And I think we've got some great channels in place already, some great information and ways of onboarding volunteers and welcome webinars and all of those good things. So, you know, what do we need to tweak? What do we need to introduce? You know, all part of the review process. And then the disciplinary processes. I mean, if something happens at the moment, you have to raise a complaint against the code of conduct, and that has to go into customer services. That's not ideal. We need to create other channels for that, and we need to think about what are the processes when something is raised. So lots of chunky stuff there to consider. And then there's an ongoing embedding best practice and continuing those communications, sharing resources, making sure that dialogue and examples and those role models and the workshops and skills are developed as well, and that everybody feels included in that. So quite a big piece of work. We do have a timeline and some actions behind this, which I'm not going to share now. But I think overall we need to think about the culture that we have across the BCS group, both volunteers, staff, and what we're projecting to the outside world, and make sure that we're really moving towards best practice. So I think I don't want to stop there. I want to also just share that we're going to be kicking off a programme of action. So trustee boards have been discussing this at length. Council have had a sight of this report, so trustee board, and also council have done their own set of recommendations. So trustee board asked our CEO Rashik to make sure that this is properly led, and this is there's a programme of work that supports this, of which the community inclusion work will form a part. So we've got our kick-off meeting this week with an EDI working group internally to spin that up. We're going to be looking at what change is needed, drawing on the different inputs from all the different information that we've got, and thinking about the right behaviours and the culture that we want to create, and then thinking about internal champions within BCS who can work to change that culture. So this is just reassurance that we're looking at this more broadly, and overall we want to move the dial on this and sort of live up to the narrative that we've got out in the market and build on all of that great work. So I know I haven't got too long, there's a lot of information that I've delivered, so I'm going to stop sharing and we can have a bit of a chat and discussion about what we've shared today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Holly. We're going to go to Jack and then we'll come back and kind of roll up Q&A in both sections. Lots of interesting questions. It might give you a chance to kind of read through some of the questions in chat. We'll pass to Jack now. Jack, please, can you give us an update?
Absolutely. Perfect. That is sharing all well and good, I'm going to assume. So good evening, everyone. My name is Jack, and I'm the Community Development and Partnerships Manager at BCS. So for my section of the agenda, I'm just going to walk you through the CSC roadmaps, provide progress updates, and some other BCS updates that might be of interest to you. So keeping with the original themes that emerged from last year's volunteer satisfaction survey, first I'm going to go over the communication and collaboration roadmap. So the items detailed on this first roadmap are relatively straightforward, but you'll note the addition in May of the BCS welcome event that we held on the 31st. So this event was a hybrid event that was designed to welcome and empower new IT professionals from around the world who've recently immigrated to the UK. So the event offered insights into the IT career landscape with the aim of attendees gaining first-hand knowledge from industry experts and networking with fellow IT professionals in the UK. Overall, the event had a considerable reach. It attracted 130 in-person registrants and 199 online registrants. So by hosting that style of event, we hope that we welcomed them not only into BCS, but also into the UK tech industry. You'll see as well that the roadmap illustrates the schedule of volunteer newsletters and these chair and vice chair sessions as well for the remainder of the calendar year. I will note that as today's session was slightly deferred, there is a chance that the follow-up session that we've got there for the 19th of September will also be pushed back just to fulfill that initial quarterly profile. But if that does happen, then we'll definitely communicate that well ahead of time. You see that we've also added as well the establishment of role-based communities to the forthcoming programme for next year. And that is due to a review of some of the other projects we've going on and prioritisation within the committee, which I'll go into further onto the next couple of slides. So regarding volunteer experience and development, you'll note the initiation of UX Enhancements Phase 2 has been kicked off and is currently pending deliverables. In terms of Phase 1, we're collaborating with BCS UX's team to simplify and refine the volunteer user experience based on common pain points that people not only reported in the feedback, but that we've heard from conversations with volunteers in general. So Phase 1 focused primarily on evaluating Volunteer Hub and optimizing the Zendesk platform. Since then, the project has become more substantial, now including a revamp of the Volunteer Hub, as well as optimization of the BCS Help Center FAQs for volunteer-centric content. Therefore, it requires a lot more BCS resource than we were initially expecting. So we've got updates to the My BCS platform, which have been taking up a lot of the work that the UX team have been doing recently. So moving into this month, we've got the Volunteer Satisfaction Survey, or VSS as we call it, which has been brought forward from September to July to align with that annual cycle that we're looking at getting feedback from our volunteers. That has been briefed in now with our BCS research team and should be live in the next couple of weeks. So we'll send out a series of communications just to let our volunteers know when that survey is live. And then we'll be looking for your input there. So it shouldn't take more than 5 or 10 minutes to complete that survey. So your feedback will naturally be crucial in helping us understand what we're doing well and where we can improve. So by sharing your thoughts and experiences, you enable us to enhance the volunteer program and create more rewarding experiences for everyone involved. So if you can spare the time when that is released to give that feedback, that would be greatly appreciated by BCS and the Community Support Committee. If we move slightly further down right there to October, the BCS Discover CPD content generation and process project has been deferred from April this year to start in the new BCS year to align with wider business planning to incorporate more community-centric content into the BCS Discover space. So this will see a larger collaboration between the community and BCS member engagement teams, and also the content team as well, just to make that process as streamlined as possible. Shifting over to November, the project regarding the enhancement of volunteer journey has been pushed back slightly from June to November due to the ongoing work we've got with the member group rules and processes. As the rules will influence the assets that we create, such as the volunteer handbook, the completion of that review will be a dependency. And then finally, moving on to the box on the right-hand side there, you'll see that moving on to next year's programme is member group reporting. So within the Community Support Committee, we are actively recruiting at the moment for a member group lifecycle officer. So we want to wait until that individual is in position and is fully settled within the committee, so then they can feed into that and support groups prior to any measures being introduced. Again, work on the member group rules will provide insight into how best we should be reporting on member groups. And then shifting onto the slide, the final aspect of the roadmap is member group enablement and support. So looking at March, we conducted a review of member group websites and conducted an experiment of sorts as to how we can optimize these spaces for both current and prospective group members. After exploring a few different routes, it was determined that what we really needed to do was kick off a formal project within BCS. And we've been working with the BCS UX and web teams to audit member group sites and tap into the community to ascertain the best course of action on that front. So that process was actually kicked off formally last month, using the feedback that we've got from previous surveys and conversations we've had around that. And the UX team are currently designing workshops for volunteers to provide their thoughts and opinions in terms of what these pages should look like moving forward. So watch this space. We're hopefully going to be in touch again in the next few weeks, just for a call to action for people to get involved in those workshops and really feed into what these member group pages will look like in the future and what their intended purpose is. And then that brings us on to the review of the member group rules and processes project. So this item was not captured historically in the roadmap, as it was formally kicked off last month as delegated from the community board. So the scale and scope of this task, as I'm sure you can imagine being on the inside looking out, it's meant that as a committee, we've really needed to reconsider prioritization of projects that were detailed in previous iterations, as you've seen, and really focus on how the resource of the committee is being used to fulfill this project brief, as this is what we've deemed to be the highest priority of the group. So we'll go over the approach we're taking to this project in the later segment, which Chris will host. But ultimately what we want to see is the community to feed into that review and shape the rules to fit today's context. In July, we've got there, you can see the volunteer branding toolkit. That again was pushed back slightly to July 24. As I noted previously, the team's resources have been focused on updating the My BCS platform. So in terms of this project, it'll see the creation of assets to support volunteers with running on-brand events, inclusive of a cache of BCS resources and templates that'll not only help promote the group themselves, but also BCS membership and wider BCS's missions. We're also looking to deliver some curated social media training. So the social media team have reviewed member group presence on social media platforms such as LinkedIn to really hone in on the type of content that is being produced and curate this training that will provide some support and guidance for people within that space. They're also looking at producing some templates as well off the back of that. So things like event promotion, copy that can be used, and different things in that vein as well. So in terms of deliverables, they are hoping to have some content live prior to the end of the BCS financial year in August. Moving over to the items that we've put on the programme for the forthcoming year, the development of committee role-based guidance again has been deferred purely to align with the establishment of those role-based communities we were discussing, and that'll form part of the brief given the community's initial project to collaborate on. Again, the member group rules review will be a dependency of this project, purely because if we're adding things to the rules, then these individuals in specific roles may need that guidance to implement those and make sure that they're being acted upon on the ground. And then just moving gears slightly, as part of our current Bring It On campaign, we're introducing a new member referral scheme that we're calling Member Get Member. So the Member Get Member scheme aims to make it easy for current members to refer fellow competent, ethical digital professionals for BCS memberships. So ultimately, as it says there, the ultimate goal is to strengthen our impact when striving to make IT good for society. So whilst our member groups have discount codes for referrals, we wanted to introduce a means of individual referral, that gives back to you as a referrer. So as the slide says there, we believe that the wider our reach, the greater our impact. So if you know anybody that you think might be a good fit for BCS membership, what you can do is simply send them a message. We've even drafted some text there as well that you can use to send across to them, and it'll signpost them to the campaign site so that they can find out more as well. And that is pretty much it. As a referrer, all you'll need to do is make sure that the referee receives that content and gets in touch with us. So once we've shared the links to this specific campaign, I'll share it in chat once I finish speaking. Basically, it just outlines the process. Though you send them the pre-written copy, or if you wanted to send some original messaging, or it's more of an informal chat, and you're sending the link across. What they do is when they register through the campaign, they'll just provide the details of not only themselves, but also the referrer. Once they become a professional or a fellow member, we'll send details as well in terms of how you can access a free CPD course as a thank you. So that's you as the referrer and the new member as the referee. You will both receive a free CPD course as a thank you. There are some terms as well of the referral program that can be found on the website, which I'll share the link to in the chat. And the marketing team have also created a volunteer toolkit as well to help with referrals. And that includes assets that can be presented at events. And again, it just details that referral process and give you that guidance to help you along the process. Again, these slides will go out post-session, so you should receive all of the links in here. But the process itself is pretty straightforward. And as I said, it's a nice way for us to give back to people referring, especially when we look at some of the referrals we get through using the member group code. So it's a fantastic opportunity for you to refer BCS membership to other people and get a free CPD course yourself. So, and that is pretty much everything I wanted to cover. Apologies, I was trying to get through it as quick as possible given the time constraints.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Jack. Just a reminder, if you've got any questions about the roadmap, please do use the chat. I know lots of people have been really interested in the inclusion discussion, so that's kind of taken the chat so far. So yeah, please do use that chat for additional questions, and we'll put them to Jack, or we'll be able to follow up afterwards. Thank you. So we're going to return back to first question. Just going to bring back Holly. I think the broad I mean, let me just say, first of all, I think, inclusion is not an easy topic. There are lots of difficult conversations as part of inclusion program, and thinking and thoughts and processes and ways we need to work through. So I think, inclusion isn't easy. And so I'm just going to move on to the question to Holly first. I think, Holly, there's kind of been a lot of questions around this all male panels and the kind of directive from Community Board. Could you kind of just give a bit more insight into kind of why we focused on gender initially, and kind of any thoughts moving forward on how we take approaches to policy which are more broadly inclusive?
Yes, I think Dave said it in the chat. I think there was the incident that brought things to a head. There's also the strong voice that BCS has had around gender diversity, and also the fact that women are not a minority in society. The fact that we have this in the profession is a challenge that we're all aware of. But as women are not a minority in society, we need to take positive action to ensure that we're not projecting that impression. It's not easy, and I understand Ian's point completely about niche areas of specialism. I think as an initial policy, it served its purpose. I think we do have an opportunity to iterate that. We're not saying by any stretch that this is the only aspect of diversity that we're interested in. Far from it, but I do think it is about making sure that we've got that representation on gender that's visible to the outside world, and that we work hard to make sure that we can achieve that. And actually, I think credit to the groups. The groups have really stepped up, and there've been lots of conversations with John and the team. It's not always easy to find women who are prepared to speak up, or to give their time, or to not feel kind of overburdened as always doing that. But we do have groups as BCS Women who will help to find people, and actually certainly John and the team also have a sort of broader network of people that could be drawn upon. So definitely a sort of a stepping stone, a work in progress, something that has worked for us but has sparked a lot of dialogue, understandably, and we've got the opportunity to iterate that as we go forward.
Thank you. And there was a bit of discussion around, so we focused on events at this point, and probably a fair reflection that there is probably a lot of committees also who don't currently reflect what society looks like. Any kind of thoughts there? We're not making any asks to change.
No, I mean, I think we haven't got a policy that covers committees. We want to do everything we can to encourage more people to apply for committee roles. We know it's not easy. I think we have got aspects of diversity across the community in our committees. We've got more to do. So really, we need to probably step back and think more broadly about how do we attract and encourage everybody to participate. So I think that really should be the focus area. And another point, just to come back to events, I think we can get really hung up on panels. There are lots of different ways of kind of engaging people and getting the information across. You've got sort of fireside chats for two people. You've also got the opportunity to kind of engage the audience and do table discussions, depending on the side of the side, and sort of workshops. So I think we also need to kind of almost get out of the panel mindset as being the answer to everything, where it might be a bit easier to get greater participation, and actually people who might not feel comfortable contributing to a panel would feel more comfortable to contribute in slightly different formats. So I think that's a kind of challenge for all of us, and certainly something we're thinking about a lot centrally in the events that we do.
Thanks, Holly. And there's been some note just on kind of communication of that Community Board directive. I think, yes, one of the things we found in the consultation is that the kind of need to increase communication around topics like this. And we need to help, in the first instance, help people to understand why inclusion is important to the industry. So, there's definitely some work to do there. And so one of the first steps in the plan that Holly's presented there is about trying to build, first of all, inclusion expertise, but also have a bit of a kind of consultative approach to ensuring that we get to our policies and processes, and get to a point where we're kind of using language where everybody feels a sense of belonging in BCS community, regardless of gender, sex, ethnicity. And I think, there is an awful lot of good which takes place in our community, which we really should be sort of recognising. The inclusion network, inclusion officers, again, within the report, we sort of understood that there's not enough support which goes in there, and we need to think about how we kind of support those individuals who have been conducting those roles now. But more broadly, how do we kind of support committees in getting this right? So, yeah, lots of work to come, but I think we've got sort of a good plan, and we're beginning to develop our kind of own expertise on this area, and making a positive impact.
Can I just say one more thing around
Yeah.
the inclusion executive that we are developing, and across the board? I think allyship is also really important. So, there's an opportunity for everybody to lean in here and, support the inclusion drive, maybe to look at one of those opportunities on the inclusion executive as well.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Holly. I think the focus very much was on the inclusion discussion there. So, Jack, thank you so much for kind of sharing the roadmap. There's lots of really good things in there and updates which we hope will kind of support the idea of a volunteer experience and just make volunteering in the community a bit easier for people who are contributing. And hopefully that also will result in us developing kind of a more inclusive community. People feel that volunteering with BCS is easy and rewarding. So thanks so much, Jack. Reminder, we've recorded the session. We'll be sharing the slides so you have a chance to kind of go into some of that detail and pick up on some of the progress we're making at your own free time. I'm just going to now move on. So we've got Beth Clark, who's joined us. Beth, thank you so much. You're on holiday. You're on a chair, vice chair.
I am, yeah.
Amazing. Thank you. Can you share your screens and share a little bit of your kind of experiences and what's worked for you and your group?
Yeah, absolutely. Can you just let me know that the slides are coming through, that the Wi-Fi is all right?
Wi-Fi is working perfectly for now. Fingers crossed.
Amazing. Great. Cool. I will try and keep this short because I know that we've got a mural board to get through at 7 o'clock. But for those who don't know me, I'm Beth. I am the Deputy Marketing and Communications Secretary for SIGIST, which is our special interest group in software testing. I've been on committee for just under 2 years now, and came onto committee from the Wise Young Professionals Board, which Holly in one of her slides mentioned is a group that's done a lot of work with BCS in the past. And on that board, I was also in charge of their social media, and then have brought those skills to SIGIST over the last couple of years. And we've seen quite a large change in how we're using social media for our communications, and have been reached out to by lots of groups who are interested in the graphics and campaigns that we've been putting together. So I just wanted to quickly share a bit of history over how we got to the position we're in now, and then also some advice and the lessons that we've learned over the last couple of years in making sure that we get the most out of using social media. So a bit more about our journey. So SIGIST was founded 35 years ago in 1989. Obviously, social media was not a tool that we had access to right at the beginning. So we primarily relied on things like newsletter communications and then emails later on. We actually didn't get our first social media account until 2010, where we got our first Twitter account, which we do still use now. And that was all we relied on for 12 years. We didn't really have much of a strategy going forward with Twitter. We just posted sort of ad hoc when committee saw something that was interesting, or we wanted to retweet from another account something that was relevant. And it was also a way for the members of the software testing committee to kind of interact with us a little bit. So we grew a few hundred followers over the course of 12 years of having Twitter, but with no real strategy or plan in place. It kind of stagnated over time, and Twitter in recent years has also dropped in popularity. So when I came onto SIGIST in 2022, the very first thing I did was create a social media strategy, which I'll share in a bit more detail in a second. But the crux of it was to expand us onto new platforms. So I got us set up with LinkedIn, which was a way to connect with many more professionals in the tech and software testing worlds. And I also got us set up with an Instagram, because one of our aims of using social media was to connect with the next generation. We wanted to inspire young professionals and students and teach them about careers in software testing that they may not have heard of. And Instagram is a really great platform to do that, as not all students and young people have LinkedIn accounts or Twitter accounts. And then all the way up into 2024. So over the last couple of years, we've seen quite a lot of growth, and I'll share a few numbers in a second. But we've been able to kind of package up this strategy into best practice that we're able to share with others. We have a suite of tools that we use. We have a strategy that we review in our AGMs. We have metrics that we track, etc. And we're now able to come out and support other groups with their social media strategies too. So I just wanted to quickly share examples of some campaigns that SIGIST have run in the past for those of you who may not have seen us on social media. If you don't follow us on social media, I should also encourage you to follow us. We are just SIGIST or Special Interest Group on Software Testing on all social media channels. So there's generally two kinds of campaigns that we run as SIGIST. This first type that's on the screen is more of our ad hoc campaigns. So we tend to run quite a lot of events for our members, which are either hybrid or purely online. So we use social media to advertise and market those events to our members, making sure that they are not only aware of them and signing up and attending, but that throughout the day they're engaging with us online. We want people to be posting pictures of when they've been at the events. We want people to be sharing their feedback about what they really enjoyed, perhaps what they didn't enjoy, and yeah, just really grow engagement within our community. And another way of doing that outside of just events is we want to allow our members to get to know our committee members a bit better. So that's what the 3 posts at the top are, our little committee profiles that we put out every now and then, particularly just after our AGM when we've had new members come in, just so that our members can find out a little bit more about us and our backgrounds, what our role on committee is, so that they have familiar faces when they do come to our events, or if they want someone to get in touch with. So our campaigns take a few forms. We've obviously got static graphics. We've also got some motion graphics like you can see on the screen, and videos. We also do just text-only posts, and we also share our newsletter that we have at SIGIST called The Tester, which is an online PDF. So we try and use a variety of media to get engagement from our members and followers. The other type of campaign we do is sort of longer term. So those ad hoc campaigns I showed generally tend to last a couple of weeks up to maybe a month. But SIGIST, every year we have our annual summer conference, which is our biggest event of the year, where we tend to get around 200 attendees, both in person and online, down at the BCS offices in London. We tend to get a diverse set of speakers to come and present at our events as well. And we really just like to highlight that to as many people as possible. So these campaigns for our conference generally tend to last about 6 months. So they will start just before Christmas time, around New Year, where we're aiming to recruit speakers. So we will put out lots of posts advertising our call for papers, what the theme is for our conference, and what we're looking for. We'll also post any feedback we've received from previous speakers to try and inspire people who maybe haven't been to our events before and aren't sure what it's about. And then once we have our speaker lined up confirmed, then we're back onto sort of more traditional advertising and marketing, where we're wanting to sell tickets, we're wanting people to get involved, we're wanting people to show up on the day. And so as well as sharing information about our speakers, we will also share information around ticket prices, about what makes our conference different and why you should come to it as opposed to maybe other events, because the software testing conference space is quite busy. And in addition to the graphics you see on screen, where we've got all of the speakers in one place, we make sure that each speaker has their own individual graphic so they can do self-promotion as well. So we kind of grow organically rather than it just being reliant on us posting. We want our communities to create a buzz and get people excited about the event. And I mentioned video content as well. So the video on the right-hand side is an Instagram reel that provides a bit of a summary on what our 2023 conference was like. So giving people who weren't actually able to attend our event in person a bit of an insight into what the BCS office looks like, what the event was like. And the main reason for that is we've seen that people really engage with that content online. So yes, so we give people that extra insight into our events, because it means if you weren't able to come one year, you can get excited and ready for the next year. And what that's allowed for with Sigist is we've seen quite a large growth in our event attendance. So at our 2023 summer conference, we had, I think, around 150, 170 attendees online. And this year we grew to 200. We had maximum capacity at the venue, our largest amount of ticket sales online. We also had a larger diversity of speakers. Yeah, so we'd seen a lot of growth and interest in people engaging in previous social media campaigns, and that has driven and snowballed our growth. So we're seeing a lot of improvement. And in terms of what that looks like in numbers, so we've now got nearly 2,000 followers across all of our social media accounts. So since 2022, that is quite a large growth, just growing from a few hundred on Twitter into the scales of thousands. On our LinkedIn alone, we are just shy of 1,000 followers on there. And what that means is outside of our sort of pure membership community who would receive our email communications and our newsletters, we're now reaching people who may not necessarily be members of BCS, may not be members of Sigist, but who might have an interest in the topics that we're speaking about, the events we want to attend, and through following us on social media may then be converted into additional members or into attendees of Sigist events. Like we've seen on the screen, we've had 2 sold out conferences in the last 2 years, and we're hoping to repeat that again with an even larger venue and conference next year. And a lot of that is just down to the power of social media and how it has built our reputation and our brand. So a few benefits of why you should use social media. I've touched on the first one already, but it's about engaging with our members. It's giving them a new way to provide feedback on how well we're doing, whether they're enjoying our events, whether there's things we could be doing better. They're able to engage with other members of our community as well. I've put in a screenshot there from a LinkedIn comment that somebody left on a post from our 2024 conference, which is from a member who had become a bit disengaged with Sigist in the past, and then because of the event that we were running and the promotion they'd seen, they actually made the effort to come to our conference in London in person, which is really nice. And that's exactly the aim of using social media, is to bring these people back into being proactive members of BCS and of Sigist. It helps us grow our reputation. So I've mentioned already that we help attract new members through using social media. We also attract speakers for our events. We also attract sponsors and partners, which is really handy when we're looking to grow our conference in future years, and we're going to be reliant on extra funds to make that happen. But we're also able to promote our values as well. We're able to give Sigist a bit more of a personalized voice, showing what we think is important to us. We're able to comment on sort of ongoing issues that we see in the news. We're able to share articles and stories from our members that we think resonate with what's important to the committee. And then we use that to help influence the wider software testing industry. So we're able to engage in wider discussions with policymakers, for example, with other specialist groups, with the wider BCS committee, and make sure that we're having that impact that we previously weren't able to have because of our lack of presence on social media. And a final point of benefit is it keeps us relevant for the future. Social media is the future, whether people like it or not. Everybody is online, everybody is digital. And so if we were not proactively engaging on social media, we're kind of risking ourselves being left behind and being missed out of really critical conversations. So how to get started? Social media can be quite a daunting task to start if it's something that you or your committees maybe haven't used before. So I've just got a few tips, and there are some links on here that you can access on the slides when they get sent out later on. But in short, there's plenty of help out there. There are lots of free tools that you can use to do everything from graphic design and making sort of your posts look brilliant and represent the brand correctly, through to tools that can help you schedule your posts in advance. So you're not having to sit at your laptop every day trying to think of something to post. You can sit down and plan everything out. There's also plenty of analytics tools available so that you can measure metrics like follower numbers and kind of see in a numerical form the impact and benefit that social media is having. Touching on the look and feel of your graphics, it's really important that any social media posts do follow the brand guidelines that BCS has produced, which are available online. They're quite extensive and really helpful, at least I've found, but some key areas to focus on are use of the BCS logo, what our brand colors are, and the brand voice, which is all about the tone of the text that you use when you're posting on social media. We've touched on diversity a bit tonight already. but that also comes into social media. When you're designing your graphics and writing your text, you need to be thinking about accessibility. So when you are posting images on social media, it's really great to have alternative text available so that people who might be using screen readers are able to get a description of what that picture looks like. And when you're thinking of what your graphics might look like and you're using the brand colors, it's really important to check the contrast of images. And that's a lesson that we've kind of learned at SIGIST over the last couple of years, where we've had feedback saying that, oh, I found this graphic difficult to read. And so we've adjusted our graphics going forward to make sure that they're a bit bolder. And there are tools online, like I've linked to the color contrast checker on the screen, that you can use to check that graphics are readable. And the biggest piece of advice is I can give is have a dedicated social media person. Social media is not a small task, especially if you want to be getting the most out of it. And so if you were to give it to a committee member who already has a designated responsibility, it could very easily become overwhelming trying to manage social media on top of another responsibility. So the role that I have on my SIGIST committee is Deputy Marketing and Communications Secretary, but I'm sure you could create a social media position on your committees if you don't have anything else that's suitable. Finally, just wanted to share two of the most important lessons that we've learned over the last couple of years. So the first one actually is something that we've only done in the last couple of months, which was about producing a code of conduct. So we had originally produced this code of conduct for our 2024 conference to make sure that people had expectations on what behaviour was considered acceptable when attending our SIGIST events. But what was kind of special about our code of conduct is, as well as defining what was acceptable when attending an event, our code of conduct also covers being responsible and respectful online when talking about our events. So when you're commenting on our posts, or you were posting something online about a talk that somebody gave, for example, we strongly encourage our members to be positive and respectful, which really helps our speakers feel much safer, particularly because we like to support a lot of first-time speakers who might be nervous about some of the feedback they receive. And that just helps encourage a healthier social media ecosystem, because without those sort of boundaries and expectations, social media can become a bit of an angry and scary place. And the second lesson learned is ask for help. Like I mentioned before, social media can be really daunting. The internet is constantly changing, trends are constantly changing, technology is always evolving over time. So feel free to sort of reach out to me, reach out to social media teams that BCS has, reach out to people in other groups, have a look online for tutorials, but do not try and sort of suffer along if social media is something that you want to be making use of in your committees. There is plenty of support out there if you reach out. And that is all my slides. I'll hand back to John.
Thank you, and sorry, there's a couple of interruptions, but they didn't impact the presentation. It was brilliant. There's so much useful content that you just shared with everyone on the call. There were quite a few questions. Some of them were about you kind of touched on towards the end, so in your helpful hints and tips around kind of what guidelines need to be followed, BCS brand guidelines. And the kind of point around how much time you need to be able to contribute to this. I think you covered that in kind of making sure that, you know, multiple people on the committee are contributing, but would you like to kind of add anything to people's concerns about perhaps how much time they might need to invest, and perhaps also the kind of the trade-off, the investment of time and reward you're seeing as a group?
Yeah, I completely understand the worries. When I first took on a role in social media, it can just feel like a sort of a rabbit hole to get lost down. I think my best piece of advice would be focus on one platform first, and I'd probably recommend a LinkedIn account for your group if you don't already have one, because that is where we have seen the most impact and the most growth. LinkedIn is also a platform that I would expect most people to be familiar with, so it's sort of less of a jump in getting used to something new. I think it is an investment up front to sort of learn how to use social media effectively, and it's definitely something that does take a while to get used to. But at least I know I've got a couple of members of SIGIST committee on the call, but I think we would all agree that it's been a worthwhile investment. And after that initial learning curve, getting our social media platform set up, We've kind of now got a business as usual routine where we kind of schedule posts every few weeks. We know what's coming up in our calendar, and now we're just kind of going through the motions. It doesn't seem as big of a task. So it might seem a bit intense for the first month or two, especially, but if you've got a dedicated person, eventually it'll just become routine like any other committee role.
Thank you for sharing that. But the response is overwhelming. Lots of people just saying how great it is, and really good to see that kind of skill sharing. So thank you. Mike's also put in there, which I thought was quite nice. That Mike Harris has put in there the kind of the code of conduct we have as a group as well. And I know you talked about in your presentation. So that's really useful. And it also kind of helps us with the conversation we had earlier around inclusion and making people feel comfortable. So thank you. Right, Beth, I think you need to get offline, enjoy your holiday. Thank you ever so much for this evening.
That's very pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So I'm now going to pass over to Chris, and Chris is going to be talking a little bit about the member group rules and the process we're now undertaking to review and update them. Chris, over to you.
Thanks, John. I'm conscious of time, that we're running short, so I'm going to try and fly through this as quick as possible to really set the scene for the interactive sessions that we want to get into on this session. So this is really just to provide a little bit of an overview and a recap as well. CSE, when established, there were 4 key aims, and a couple of the aims are very much focused around member group rules, processes and procedures. Jack mentioned earlier on sort of the cascade from community board to be able to update these member group rules. It wasn't on the roadmap because what we wanted to make sure is that the roadmap was focused on the feedback from volunteers, and so the roadmap was formed from volunteer satisfaction survey. So that's why we've seen it be introduced to the roadmap more recently. So quick overview. Member group rules and processes, they haven't been updated now for 9 years, and community board responsible to be able to approve them. Some of the driving factors really behind sort of why we need to do this. Obviously, a lot of things changed in post-pandemic world. We continuously see things changing around us and evolving, and preferences are also sort of continuing to change for the sort of content, events and conferences that people are looking for. So relationship of the rules to other member, other hierarchy of regulations. So what we've got is basically the highest level wins. So there's been an assessment that I've carried out across the charter, the bylaws and some of the regulations that we've got that are overarching. There's about 119 pages that we've got the overarch member group rules. Currently there's about 19 pages in the member group rules, and it's just one document. So what we're really looking to do is to reduce the amount of pages, but get it to a point where it's a bit more modular, so we can introduce more frequent reviews going forwards. The scope of the member group rules, so effectively 1 to 6, it's a lot about the overarching sort of governance, some of the process, some of the definitions of what member groups are, that again come from things that are overarching. So what we've got highlighted here is sort of the core content areas in the member group rules that are really in scope to review. So looking at governance meetings with member groups, committees, finances, events, conventions. There are a few that have now been taken out of scope. So the member group representation, a lot of this really came from the overarching bylaws and regulations. So we've got that covered elsewhere. Publishing has now moved to a central function facilitated by a publishing department. And so the rules were really about guidance more than anything else. And what we're now starting to see is student prizes are currently reviewing sort of strategic level that's appropriate to the BCS governance to best place the support, aligning more towards sort of the academic board that we have there. So when we've been looking at those sort of 5 core areas, there's a high-level assessment that we've carried out, just looking at, obviously, they're included in the member group rules, but we wanted to see what content we had elsewhere, because there's really the sort of the processes to follow and some of the procedures that we see in Volunteer Hub and Volunteer Handbook. There's not perfect alignment at the moment. That's something we want to work on. So as we start thinking about reshaping the rules, processes and procedures, really thinking about member group rules being applicable for all, and being contained in the updated version where we're really looking for your involvement and contributions, and also processes. So really thinking about sort of best practice and how we can provide that overview for many, and containing that in the Volunteer Hub. And then the procedures, getting more involved into the sort of the how-to guides, step by step, to be able to provide clear guidance on how to get stuff done. So Jack mentioned on the roadmap earlier, big focus around UX at the moment. So really thinking about where we put in content, how easy it is to access content. So really see that coming together around with the processes and procedures. Within Community Support Committee, in our recent monthly meeting that we had, we started to look at some of the proposed workshops that we could carry out. So communication collaboration came up, events and conferences came up, and also member group website surfaced, given sort of that was one of the areas that was on the roadmap that Jack gave us an update on earlier. So
thank you all for joining us this rather warm evening. I do hope that you get a good night's sleep. It's going to be very hot. I haven't got any tips on temperature and management of that. But what I do want to say is a huge thanks to all of our speakers, and thank you all for your contributions. Inclusion was a really lively discussion, and as I sort of reflected on at the time, it is a really difficult thing for us to get right, and I think it's going to take a lot of collective work for us to kind of reach a point in which we feel that, and others feel that, BCS is a kind of welcoming community, which is there for everybody. And then also really great to hear from Jack, to sort of see progress along the UX work, and there's some great milestones coming up. We talked about social media with Beth, and she shared some of her hints and tips on the roadmap. There's also a little bit around some social media training that we're looking to start sharing in the future. Beth, phenomenal presentation. Thank you, Beth. I'm not sure if you're still here or if you've made it back to your holiday. Really appreciated that. And thank you all for your contributions in that area.